Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Real View podcast. I am your host, Allison Wiley. Joining me today, our special guest, I would like to welcome back Monica Neubauer. She is an international speaker and award-winning real estate agent. She is no stranger to Ohio Realtors, joining us at convention this year. We are so happy to have her on and have her with us at our big event. Monica, welcome onto the show.
Thank you, Allison. It is my pleasure to be with you. I love to talk real estate, talk life, and I'm looking forward to being with your members here pretty soon.
Yes, we are too. We always love when we get to hear from you and hear your wealth of knowledge you have to share with us. But before we get started in today's conversation, which is going to be a little preview into your session at convention, we're going to talk about this world of being a buyer's agent, how to do it well, how to do it right, some tips and best practices. You're going to share a little bit about that with us. But before we get started in that, I would like to hear a little bit more about you. Tell us a bit about yourself, your career background, and how you got started in the industry.
Well, all right. Thank you. I have been in now 21, working on 22 years. And, when I first got in, I said, I'm just going to commit for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, though. I love change, which was part of what got me into real estate, because every deal, I did a really hard deal with somebody once early on, and it just had all these dominoes and just went on. And afterwards, he sent me a gift. It was a tote bag, and on it was in Latin something that said, "This too shall pass." And that actually has been a great thing for me in real estate. And then I moved into podcasting myself and into speaking and so many other, it's given me a lot of opportunity. But I love that, yes, we work really hard and sometimes deals are really hard, but they're going to pass for us and for the client. And I think when we have some expectation that, yep, there's going to be some hard things. All right, but they're one, accepting there are going to be some hard things, and I've learned to do that. And two, then recognizing that at some point they're going to be done. But here's the interesting thing, transitioning into current times, is that I think real estate agents are going to be more willing to be honest with themselves and their clients when things aren't going well, and to end it sooner if it's not going to get somewhere that's going to bear fruit for everybody.
That's interesting. And that was one of my questions, as we get into the show was, what do you think the future of this looks like? And that's a great point that I don't know that we've ever talked about on the show, or that I've heard talked about just around this topic in general is what does that look like if you enter into this agreement and you realize, hey, this might not be what's best for both of us. That's super interesting. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, with the structure that we've had in place traditionally, there was this unilateral offer of compensation. So on almost any house, it's always been negotiable. So we know that some offers have not been, some of them have been all over the place, but by and large, there's been a fairly sufficient unilateral offer of compensation. And so people could balance this sense of, okay, if this deal doesn't go well, or I'm going to do that, there's going to be a paycheck. It's going to be at the end. I'm okay with that. Well, as people are learning to negotiate their own value and recognize that that unilateral offer may or may not be out there, well, now people are asking themselves a little bit more. Agents are definitely, but I think some consumers are asking themselves this as well, is what am I signing up for? What is it going to cost? And the realtor is saying, what is it going to cost me in my time? If this person looks like they're going to be too much of a challenge to work with, they're not participating in getting their financing in line, they're kind of all over the place, I think it's going to lead to more consultations back in the office. Okay, we've been looking at things and it hasn't been working, so let's readjust. I really think this situation is going to create more focus on the part of agents, and I think they'll be willing to walk away faster from clients who are unmotivated.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think even bringing up the fact that that's going to be an option, I know this question was coming up a lot is well, is this written agreement just set in stone and we have to follow this and that's it? And whatever happens, we can't change it. But there are going to be opportunities and ways that we are able to come back to the table if something isn't working out, that we're able to say, hey, let's take a look at this and see, if it's working the best for all of us. And I think that that's important to know, and maybe that will help some of the fear or concern with having these agreements that, hey, this is set in stone and it can never change. You're kind of saying that these conversations might happen and that we will be able to change it if we need to.
Yeah, we can change it if we need to. And some of that is going to be learned as we go along. And unfortunately, we will have some more expensive mistakes along the way. But I think the agents who've had some more experience, who have recognized, one, that consultations are hugely important. The newer agents are still finding that out because they joined in the crazy years. But those of us who've been doing it a while, we know that consultations are crucial and they give you that stronger foundation. So I think there's going to be some more markers along the line where people will be asking more questions of themselves and their client, and I hope of their agent as well, that the public will ask more questions.
Yeah, because that was really the whole point of this settlement, was to bring more transparency to that process for consumers to feel more empowered, more aware, more comfortable and clear with what they're getting when they work with a realtor. So I think, that was a big part of why we are where we are now with the requirement of these written agreements. So I think it's really a good thing, and that we should be expecting to get these questions, and consumers having more to say and more input than maybe they have in the past. So we talked a little bit about kind of what has changed. What do you see that's going to be staying the same when we think about working with buyers?
That's a great question, because people are so overwhelmed with the change, they're not realizing that it doesn't need to be that different.
Yeah.
And you see some agents kind of coming on chat rooms and stuff. It's like, oh, I'm still doing things exactly the same. Well, it's not going to be exactly the same, but the reality is that there has been money in the transaction. That's the way I like to put it. You have people participating in the transaction. So sellers have been participating in the paying of both agents, but buyers have been participating in the payment of both agents because they're bringing the money. And so everyone is participating. So that's one of my new favorite languages. Are we participating? And so what's staying the same is that we get to negotiate with our buyers what we're going to get paid. And we need to say, even something along the lines of, maybe this is what I would have gotten paid, but the situation has changed and this is my fee. Whether that's similar to what they got paid before, or they've decided they're going to make some adjustments. Some people may charge less, some people may charge more. All of this, people narrowing in on what they do. I'm having some agents go, wow, I do a heck of a lot of work, and I deserve to get paid really good money for this because I'm really in it. So I'm having agents in my classes really consider what they do and what their time's worth. And of course, the aha that they're spending more time than they thought they did. And so I think eventually that's going to give them the power to say, this is my value. So what's staying the same is that every agent needs to expect they're going to get paid once they negotiate their fee with their client. But the thing that's changed in that is the terms will often all be in the purchase and sale agreement, not between the listing agent and their agent, because that's going to be separate. But that's the biggest change, is we need to discuss it in terms of putting it in the purchase and sale agreement. But people still deserve to get paid. They're still going to talk about it up front, and it'll be hard for some people because they haven't had to, but that's a good thing. And as far as having a written agreement, that's also a really good thing. The written agreement, in a lot of states, we've already needed to have a written agreement, and a lot of agents have put it off and not signed it till they got closer to the contract period or right at contract. And so it's the same thing done a little differently. How about that?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I love that you brought up the state law, and that a lot of states, or many states, have been practicing this, or at least if it wasn't state law, have been encouraging this. I know I've heard from a lot of realtors who said, I've been trained on this for, since X day when I first started in the industry, my brokerage said to do this. So we were here in Ohio. House Bill 466 requires written agreements for clients working with real estate agents. So this will include any non-realtor agents out there as well. That did pass through our legislature here at the Ohio State House, and our governor was able to sign that bill into law at the end of July, and it will go into effect in about 90 days from the signature date. So we're expecting that to become state law in the end of October. So what's really great about that is not only do we have realtors now required to have these written agreements with their buyers, but we also have non-realtor real estate agents that will be required to do the same thing in our state law. So it really just levels the playing field, and it's a great way to ensure that anyone who's working with a realtor and a non-realtor real estate agent, is able to have a clear and concise picture on what services they're going to be expecting. So we're really, really thrilled to see that go through, and I think it's going to be great for the state of Ohio. And I know, many states are working on some of the similar things as well. So really great news on that, and thank you for bringing up the part about the laws there. It was great.
A couple of things that are really great about that I'm excited about is one, I love that your legislator saw that that's a good practice. And now we want all our licensees to do that. And I haven't heard of other states doing that. So we'll see if others follow Ohio's lead in that. So that was one thing, was everybody's going to sign one now. So there's not going to be a difference there. And the other thing that I want to focus on for just a second is the word agreement. The word agreement does not establish any agency status. It just says, we have an agreement. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to pay me. And it can run the gambit. And so I know NAR is really trying to focus on that as well. And I've even seen some conversations with the public. There is confusion out there saying, oh, I'm signing a buyer's representation agreement. Well, let's use very clear language, and depending on your state, what does that mean? So I just love saying a buyer's agreement that establishes the agency we're going to move forward together in. And that language sounds like that's in that law. And I really love that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too. I think that helps calm down any of the worries or concerns that comes up as we try to explain this to clients, and just getting comfortable with it as our realtors ourselves.
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
And you mentioned this earlier, a big part of this is going to be this value proposition and being able to explain, the services that are provided for the fee that we're negotiating. Talk to us a little bit about this value proposition. What do really good ones look like? What are some things that we should be thinking about or including in this value proposition as we move forward with the new changes?
Well, let me just first say, I love disruptive words. And value proposition is one of those phrases that's been around in all of our classes, and it describes what we want to say so well. And I'm still waiting for somebody to help me find the best word to replace value proposition.
Yeah, so true, right?
Right? It's your business model. It's what you do best. And I am teaching agents to really focus on creating the professional image that you want people to see of you. It's creating beautiful materials that list in written form. Maybe you like doing videos, do it in video form. People don't want to sit in a consultation and hear an agent say, oh, this is all I do, blah, 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 blah. And as agents are realizing, we do much more than even we realized. That's just blah, 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 blah. So it needs to be in written form, whether it's in a book form or in a few handouts or something. There needs to be something clear. And agents need to know within their list of things that they do, where are the negotiable points? Because if people want to negotiate with you, they're not necessarily asking for you to give them back everything. They just want to feel like you heard what their need is. And if there's something that you do that they say, well, I don't need that. Well, okay, hear what they're saying And I think if we can start listening to the public, I don't think some will be really demanding in the public, but some will just be asking good questions that deserve an answer. And I hope agents will begin to be more comfortable with that. Oh, I wanted to say you were talking about that earlier with the consumer. And I wanted to say I encourage agents to take this conversation to their family members they feel comfortable talking about it with, maybe even a couple of close friends. The exchanges I've had with friends and family have been really helpful to me to know what they're hearing and what their concerns are. And so they're going to learn what the consumer wants. And we've got to listen to the consumer. Y'all, we have been inside our own heads for far too long, and the consumer is not going to be as hard on you as you think. They want a real estate agent. They want you to help them.
Exactly. They are coming to you because they don't know how to buy or sell a home on their own. They need that guidance. They need that expertise. They want to work with you because they don't want to go through it alone. So I think that's a great point, is like they're coming through it not as a point of resistance or a way to not work with one. They're coming, into that with a mentality of like, we want to work with somebody. And that's a great point about friends and family. And, I'm not a realtor. I'm staff here at Ohio Realtors, but, I know enough about this world that I understand, and able to talk about it. And, I'm talking to friends and family about it and just explaining to them and hearing their feedback. We're so in our own world, as you said a minute ago, we are so in our own world with it that it's good to get feedback and perspective with the average person who is not living and breathing this every day. And it really does give you a good insight on some of those questions that might come up, what the preconceived notions that consumers might have out there after going through all of this. So that is a really good point. I think that's a great idea to start talking to people outside of this industry about what's going on.
Yeah.
You can gain so much insight from that. I want to talk about timing of this all. When we think about the life cycle of what it takes to buy or sell a home, what it takes to work with a client, a transaction, getting through, how do we know when it's the right time to be talking about this? I know you mentioned buyer consultations, but could you walk us through the timeline of what you think would be good? And I know it's probably different from client to client, but how do we know when it's the right time to ask for that written agreement?
Well, the regulations are saying that we have to have some kind of written agreement to even show a house. So some companies are calling that a touring agreement. If you just want to have a one house, two house, three house showing agreement before you have a work together commitment. And on that touring agreement, this is my fee for showing you three houses, or I'm showing this is my free service. And then we're going to talk about moving forward together. So I think some agents are still going to give some kind of a trial period, and some agents may still give a very long trial period. That's up to them, and people can walk away. So, I mean, we have for a long time given away a lot of services. So some people may do that. But so generally, when people call you or you get the referral or whatever, there's two main ways we kind of meet, at least buyers, but even prospective clients. You have strangers who found about you on the internet, or they called you on a sign or something like that. You followed up with them after an open house. You met them at Kroger because you're wearing your name tag, whatever. These are strangers. Well, those people, you need to start with 4, 5, 6 questions just to get some information. So I'm encouraging agents to come up with their first conversation questions that they ask everybody so they can provide consistent levels of service to everybody, whatever those are. And then you decide if you're going to meet them, are you going to show them a house? Where do you go from there? And then you go to the next level. So have your standard questions there. Then the next step is either you're showing them the house, which ideally we all know you should have some consultation before showing any, but we know when the rubber meets the road, we generally meet a lot of people just at a first showing. So you keep your safety practices in place and you meet them at there. But I'm encouraging agents, don't do more than a few showings, 1 or 2 at the most, before you have a consultation. You met the stranger, you showed them the house they wanted, and now, do you want to buy it? Are we going to work together? I gave you what you want, but now I need to know where we're going, and this is what my time costs. So the consultation is where your referral clients are going to come in right away. If you get the referrals, the warm leads, those are the ones where you're just going to move right into a consultation. You're probably not going to show them a house at all because they're pretty inclined to work with you. So that's when you move into the consultation, which my consultations are generally like 2.5, 3 hours.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, right?
There's a lot to talk about. And I always enjoy being with people. I am an extrovert, so I tend to have a good time in those. But there is a lot to talk about. So you need to plan for 90 minutes or more because you want them to walk out of the meeting, even if you're not signing an agreement at that meeting and you're going to meet the next day or 2 days later and do that. You want them to see your professionalism. They want to see that you know the market. They want to see that you are understanding and a person who listens to them and can understand their problems. So that's not going to happen in a 30-minute consultation. And we're going to be working with people for a long time. So I am foreshadowing some of my stuff you're going to get in my class. So we're just doing an hour at the convention. The 3-hour virtual session is where we're going to get into more of this afterwards. But I'm actually encouraging people to consider a 3-part consultation. The first one is you and the buyer. The second one, and these next two could be in any order, but the second one would be the buyer and the agent and the lender if there is a lender. And the reason I want to have that happen is because we know that lenders have different requirements for what they're seeing in the contracts. And even though the road has become open for more language and the compensation conversation to be in the purchase and sale agreement, I want to have that meeting with the lender that I'm asking them questions about what's expected, what's needed. And I want the buyer to be there because of any confidential information, but also because I want the buyer to be hearing what's needed. Because I don't want me telling them what the lender said they need to do. I want us all to be together. So that's my second consultation. And my third consultation is for the contract paperwork. Because if we're signing things electronically on the cuff, the buyers and the sellers, I think that's a good seller arrangement as well. Have another separate meeting. You can even do it on Zoom, send over the paperwork. Generally, that's a 45-minute conversation. You go through the contract. They have questions, they'll follow up with you. And I think that can save time. And it's also a really safe place to ask questions when you're not in a pressure situation.
I think that's a great kind of process, a great way to lay it out. Give your clients as much information as they can going into this. Let them hear it, from the people that they're going to work with directly. I think, that is great when you can take that telephone game, that relaying of information out of it and saying, hey, let's all sit down together and talk about it. I think that's a really great way to do it and a great approach. It's something to think about. So that's really, really a good idea. I want to talk about, so we kind of know a blueprint, a game plan of how we can approach this, what to include in that value proposition, for lack of a better term.
Until we find a new favorite.
Yeah, until someone else is going to come up with a better way to explain that. What mistakes do you see that happen when it comes to this? What should we be staying away from? Share with us maybe so we know kind of what to do, what's not to do when it comes to working with our buyers.
Ew, that's a good question. Let's see. What not to do? Well, back to what we said, even with the document, don't try and push back and not do what you need to do. Okay. Do have the conversations. I know that there are some MLSs who have already removed buyer compensation fields. And those agents had a little bit of a hiccup to have the conversations, but it hadn't been that long and they're doing fine. They're having the conversation. So don't be afraid of this. Know that there's going to be a few hard conversations. Okay. Just be nice to yourself and say, okay, here we go. Because the clients are a little nervous as well because they don't know what to expect. So just be ready to go in and say, I don't know how this is going to go, but I've got to walk through this. Anytime you're getting to somewhere where you're going to be more successful or more helpful or new or better at a skill, you've got to walk through that training and practice phase. And that's what your first 2, 3, 4 conversations are going to be. And I've seen some people posting on, in my office, and I belong to a minimum of Facebook groups because of so much craziness. So I don't belong to some of those big groups. But even in the genuine groups where people are really actually being helpful and encouraging, I'm seeing some things and it's like, okay, you got to go through that. And even some of the public is going to realize things. So don't be afraid. Know in advance, you're going to have some conversations that will be painful. Period. And then the next day you decide and say, well, do I want to work with this person? How do I? And you call them back up and you say what they think. So I hope people improve their communication skills because that'll be challenging. So, but don't be afraid of it. You have to walk through the practice of that. So I would say, don't try and put off the change. Just jump in the cold water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be my main thing. And then the other thing I would say is don't ignore your concern that this person is really out to not give you money. They really want to take advantage of you. If you find somebody is just mean to you and they're late and they're disrespectful, we need to make sure that our agreements have some kind of exit clause, whether they come with a fee or a 20-day notice or a talk to my broker first or whatever that exit clause is. Because we all have to have agreements, it's going to be crucial that we have some kind of exit conversation or language in the paperwork. And, for the buyer and for the client. So I would say, yeah, don't be afraid, but also don't ignore what your gut's telling you. Pay attention to that.
Always. I think that's one of the best things that we could do is listen to that intuition. It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just I agree. And I know that this has many people feeling uncomfortable, and that's totally okay. And change can be scary sometimes, and growing pains happen, and you're going to work through it. But I think the more that we do this, you're going to get better and better each time. So the sooner you start, as you said, the sooner you start, the sooner you can fine tune that and keep working on it. And the more you do it, that repetition and that practice, the better that you're going to get.
Yep, I agree. Because you were a new agent at some point where you learned something new and you jumped in, and now you're not new. This is just the refining of a skill that you already have.
Yeah, definitely. I want to hear a little bit more, Monica, about how we can connect with you. I know you host kind of your own podcast. You're always out at different events and speaking and providing guidance and teaching classes. Tell us about all that you do, how we can connect with you and stay in touch.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Well, MonicaNeubauer.com is my main central place. From there, you can find all my social and my book and the podcast that I host for the National Association of Realtors. It's for the Center for Realtor Development, which is one of the education arms of NAR, and it's for realtors. So we're talking detail stuff. I mean, we talk HOAs, we talk things real estate agents need to know for their knowledge base, and that's at CRD podcast.realtor. And so folks can join me there. But anything else, you can find me at Monica Neubauer. And if you're at the conference, come up and say, hey, tell me what you like about the podcast or what you'd like to hear. I always love meeting new friends when I'm out on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are looking forward to having you at our convention, and always a great time talking to you. So thank you so much for coming on as a second repeat guest. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate your time and for sharing all this great knowledge and helping us navigate this new world of buyer agency. So I want to thank you again for coming on and for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure as always. Thanks, Allison.
And to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.